through the jungle.
Esto es horrible, esto es horrible, esto es horrible.
Everybody look tired. Everybody maybe die here.
Donc vous êtes ici toute seule?
Immigration. It's been the journey that's been a part of our nature for over 10,000 years. This journey has never been easy, and many lives have been lost, families separated, and dreams have been crushed. The brutal trails that led to the other side are usually in extreme climate and are filled with landforms such as mountains and rushing rivers. But at these times, the migrants have no choice. Some need to make this journey for their family, some are in fear of their life, and immigration may be their only chance at living. We want to explain the harsh environment that migrants may have to endure during this journey with an interview.
Immigration has had a huge impact here in El Paso, and us as El Pasoans have been forced to learn how to adapt and create new ways to provide services for the immigrants that are trying to gain their citizenship. The open border policy was one of the reasons we saw a surge here in El Paso from April 2022 to February 2023. However, in August of 2022 is when we saw a sudden and massive surge of immigrants trying to gain their citizenship with very little resources for us to provide for them, which almost became an uncontrollable situation. I had the opportunity to interview a contractor manager who was put in charge of creating these buildings for immigrants to stay in and temporarily live in while they try to gain their citizenship. She did ask to remain anonymous, so throughout the interview, I will be referring to her as Emily. My very first question for Emily was, is there anything she found disturbing or unsettling about her job? And when I asked this question to Emily, she looked as if she had nothing to say at all at first and quickly replied with, yes, my job has had a few unsettling factors to it, but it is hard for me to decipher just one, especially as a mother. Then she replied with, if I had to pick just one thing, it would be the fact that the families inside these immigration facilities are separated from one another. Also, another thing that is super sad to see is what the kids go through and how stressed out and disconnected they seem. She also noted that these buildings are not really buildings and that they are more like really big tents and not so much an actual structure. My next question for Emily was if she felt as if her job was inhumane in any way. She had this to say, no, if anything, I feel the exact opposite, because we're at least providing them with food, shelter, and water, rather than letting these people sleep and live on the street or somewhere where they are unsafe. See, the way I look at it as, if they are coming here asking for help, it is because their current living situation is not ideal, and we are at least giving them the opportunity to gain citizenship and hopefully an opportunity at a better lifestyle. I then asked Emily if she had to take an estimated guess, how much government-funded money or taxpayers' money has been spent on the immigration facilities just here in El Paso alone. She replied with, considering the fact that we provide clothes for every person that goes into the system and 3 meals a day for everyone and healthcare visits if needed, I would say somewhere around 20 million. But if we are considering all the workers and Border Patrol agents that work at these immigration facilities every day, it exceeds well over 20 million. Another important thing that Emily noted was that unfortunately most of the immigrants that entered the process didn't receive their citizenship because there seemed to be a lack of knowledge that just because there was an open border policy didn't mean there wasn't any restrictions to get into the United States. This brought me around to my last question for Emily, and it was if she felt like the immigration camps have done more harm than help. She said, unfortunately, the continuous patterns of the immigrants getting their citizenship rejected started to reflect, and that was when we saw a massive surge of illegal immigrants crossing over every day on an everyday basis around late February and early March of this year. So in the long run, I think it did more harm than help, just because now there is double the work that has to be done. After doing more research and concluding my interview with Emily, I realized that immigration is not so much about where someone is actually living, but more about the ideal lifestyle that everyone has. So to me, immigration will be around for as long as human time because we are naturally made to migrate and chase the ideal lifestyle that we all have pictured.
The benefits of immigration are that it fuels the economy. When immigrants enter the labor force, they increase the economy's productive capacity and raise GDP. Their incomes rise, but so do those of natives. It's a phenomenon dubbed the immigration surplus. While a small share of additional GDP accrues to natives, typically 0.2 to 0.4%, it still amounts to $36 to $72 billion per year. In addition, to immigration surplus, immigrants increased the labor market by flowing into industries and areas where a relative need for workers and where bottlenecks and shortages might otherwise dampen the growth. There are many examples nationally and regionally of immigrants moving to where the jobs are. During and after World War II, Mexican immigrants were instrumental in alleviating shortages arising from the war effort. A record migration to Texas occurred during the late 1970s and early 1980s oil boom. In the 90s, the fast-growing South and Mountain West states received immigrants, many for the first time. Regarding occupations, immigrants flowed into high-tech jobs during the internet boom and construction jobs during the 2000s housing boom. Now, the initial reason why people immigrate is to search for their dream, or work or economic opportunities, to join or bring family over from where they used to live, or for education. Others move to escape the conflict of their country, persecution, terrorism, or human rights violations. Still, some move in response to the adverse effects of climate change, natural disasters, or other environmental factors. Now, a big success story about someone achieving their dream by immigrating is former heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou. Ngannou grew up in the small town of Badi, located in western province of Cameroon. Francis did not have an easy childhood. His father was abusive towards him and his mother. Ngannou was 10 years old when he started mining in the village. He realized early that there was no way he would change his family's life by living in Cameroon. He decided to move to America with just one dream, to become a world champion. His first stop in his journey to the United States was Nigeria. It was reasonably easy to enter Nigeria because of the open borders between both countries. The next stop for Ngannou was Algeria, where he walked down from the Sahara Desert to get a legal entry into the country. Ngannou moved to Morocco from Algeria. Morocco isn't a country you want to be in as an immigrant. He spent much of his time in Moroccan forests, hiding from the police and filling his stomach with food that he found in trash cans. Every time the police caught an immigrant, they would be dropped back into the desert in Algeria. Ngannou was dropped back to the desert in Algeria on 6 different occasions, and each time he bounced back. His grit, determination, and resilience in adversity have brought him where he is today. He later reached Spain in a boat covered with aluminum foil to avoid getting detected by the radar. Ngannou then moved to France, where he arrived in a Paris boxing gym where he trained. Ngannou's initial dream was to make it big in boxing. However, when he started training under quality coaches, they got him to shift his attention to mixed martial arts. Francis Ngannou then moved to the United States, fulfilled his dream, and competed in the UFC, where he became heavyweight champion.
We also interviewed a person that immigrated into the United States. We asked about his experience and reasons to immigrate. He told us that his original plan was to just come to the US and study here, then come back to Mexico, get a job there, and live there. Unfortunately, during his second year of his career, the tequila crisis occurred, causing the value of El Peso to drop significantly. And during this crisis, an uncle of his that was also living in the US at the moment decided to come back to Mexico, and unable to find a job for over a year in Mexico, was forced to come back to the US. So him watching this crisis occurred and his uncle situation, decided to get an internship right there, right now. He used his university's resources and got an internship at a bank. During his internship, the bank made him a job offer once he graduated. He got the job and used what's called an optional practical training to work for a year. Once the optional practical training ended, he asked for help from the bank and also from a lawyer he hired in order to get what's called an H-1B visa that's only used for professionals and works for 6 years. He got the visa and worked for 5 years and then applied to get the citizenship, becoming a U.S. citizenship after 5 years of working.
In conclusion, the presentation has demonstrated that there are pros and cons, or more like a good and dark side, with the dream of immigration to the U.S. The presentation here has shown that there have been successful immigrants who have achieved their dream, like for example Francis Ngannou. He was someone who pretty much had to go through a really rough path in Africa all the way to America just to become a UFC champ, which at the end of the day was pretty rewarding for him. Other positives that are brought up is how there are economic benefits too for the US and immigrants once they come to the US. Now, unfortunately, some of the negatives, or I guess dark sides to it, is that there was a lot of starvation and diseases and messed up stuff that immigrants have to go through when they have to travel to the U.S. And when they do make it to the U.S., there are also new challenges like being a part of a new environment. At the end of the day, as I've said earlier, a common theme that's been brought up throughout the presentation is the dream and the lengths that immigrants are going to try to achieve it, like Francis Ngannou. And with this should conclude the presentation. And thanks for listening and hope you guys enjoyed it.